Hello. Alright, so I've been doing time-lapse videos for a while now, and I've decided that I might as well start doing some tutorial videos. This can kind of help, me with getting a little bit better at editing YouTube videos, a little bit better at actually explaining my process a little bit, and if anyone can find some value in all the steps and breaking it down and start to draw a bit more often and do some like realistic drawings like I do, taking that as a win. The goal with this first kind of series is I'm going to be drawing my pet baby, our little dog, over the course of probably 5 or 6 videos, starting with this first one with like the base, grid lines, setting up the drawing, just basic stuff, and eventually reaching a point where you're doing all the details, the background, the finished drawing, everything like that. So putting a bit more explanation rather than just the time lapse where I start the drawing, finish the drawing, that's it. So this first video will simply be showing the setup, anywhere from choosing the photo all the way up to getting the grid line set up on the page. So ironically, there is no drawing in this first drawing tutorial, but stick around. First thing I'm going to do with this tutorial is do something with pets, because everyone loves their pets. So I'm going to do a drawing of my family's little dog here, baby. And so before I get started, the first thing I do is I choose a reference photo, and this is the reference photo for this one. I'm going to crop it to the size I want. You can do this kind of anywhere, whether it be like I'm using Lightroom just because I happen to have Lightroom in here. You can do it on your iPhone, that's probably the easiest thing to do, which I should have done. And in terms of the size, or the scale of the drawing that I'm going to do, I don't want it to be a big drawing, something that's 18 by 24 of just my dog, a bit too much, but maybe like 11 by 14 would be perfect. So here we got 11 by 14, and I'm going to make it so she's not the entirety of it. And she's getting old dog here, 13 years old. One thing she does is eats a ton of dandelions. So my goal here is to put a dandelion between her paws, make everything black and white except for that dandelion. So I'd say this is a good photo. She's most of it, you got your bit of rule of thirds in here, but I don't focus on that too much. So this is about the size I'm going to do. Next thing I'll do, just bump that saturation up. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, just so it forces me to add a bit more in my drawing. So let's just quickly save this bad boy. What we're going to do next is we're going to be adding grid lines. So I always use an app or just any random website online. There's a ton for free to make grid lines, because if proportions are off, you can have really skewed images, and let's be honest, no one wants a completely skewed drawing. That's why things look off, is if an eye is even like half an inch over here, boom, your drawing's kind of ruined. And that's why I like to use grid lines, because for an entire drawing, not great proportion. For little chunks, it makes it a lot easier. And I normally stick to around, each little square on the grid line is about an inch. It gives me a lot of room to play around with detail, but not too much. So in this case, I found, first time using it, motherboard, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We got 11 by 14 for the grid. I made the thickness as light as possible. I changed the color so it's easy to tell where the actual grid line is. And I had to play around with the scale to get that. So this is going to be my base image. And I use that simply for doing kind of like the background and the first layer. Oftentimes after that, I'll just simply use the black and white to get the style, so to speak. This is some scrap or an offshoot of a cut I used for an earlier drawing. I want to be cutting this into 11 by 14. This is roughly 11 by 14. One thing to keep in mind is always trim these little rough edges. They're not super reliable, so to make a nice straight edge, it's one of the best things you can do. You just grab your ruler. I have a razor that I got from an art store here. It wasn't too expensive either, and it makes a nice clean cut. In the past, I've also used X-Acto knives. And this is mostly because I don't use anything like the paper you get from like a printer or anything like that. I want to use a nice piece of paper, and I use Stonehenge, as I mentioned. It's got nice texture, it's nice and thick, and it's not too shiny, so things actually blend quite well. So to find the lengths of everything you need, I'd simply start off by, if I want to make it 14 long, make a mark at 14 and set your ruler at the end on both. Make sure it's flat. You don't want to be measuring crooked on at the top. You don't want to be measuring 14 slightly off, skewed at an angle. And I know I'm exaggerating this. You want to be as close as possible. So here we go. 14. You'll line up those 2 points. Make a nice cut. It should follow right away. Then for the next direction, we want this drawing to be 11 long already. Tricked you, just kidding, I tricked myself. It's best to put all the weight on the top side. That way your paper will not run away from you like it just did right there. And it's skewed at the end. Uh-oh. Alright, so here we go. Made a bit of a messy cut here on this top corner, but that can be hidden in the frame because I intend to put that in the frame, so I'll just remove that nice little bit. That's mostly because I wasn't paying full attention and it got a little bit sloppy, but alrighty. So the first thing we're going to be doing with our grid lines is simply start marking. So I set the grid lines up so they'd be every single inch. So I'll put my ruler on the top. I have a light pencil, in this case I have a F, and I'll make light little tick marks every single inch. And now this is quite a tedious part, so I'll likely speed up this part of the video. Make sure every edge all the way around. Alright, so now that we have our grid lines marked, simply line up the top of your ruler with each one and make sure to put some even pressure and just lightly slide across. So see some nice light lines. We want to either blend or erase these later. So if you put a ton of pressure, you're going to be seeing your grid lines, and that was a mistake I would used to make early on when drawing. Putting too much pressure and you'd always see the outlines of the grids. So make sure you do those nice and light. The pencil's nice and loose. Just the self weight of the pencil is all you really need. Once you start getting to the bottom, simply turn it around and go from there. I use this on larger drawings too, except sometimes for larger drawings I'll bump each grid is 2 inches, just so I don't have to draw 50 plus lines. So right there, I changed the angle a little bit, created a nice little slip. So in that case, what we will do, simply draw the line again, and it's quite obvious which one is the straight line for us to follow. And voila, we have the start of our drawing. that is the finished intro, so to speak, just the drawing prep for the first little part of this series. Ironically, there wasn't much drawing in the first part of the drawing tutorial, but I felt it's valuable to show how I actually start, because if you have a good base, the rest of the drawing gets easier. So follow along, hit that subscribe button, and you can continue with this tutorial as I keep adding videos and just going more and more in depth onto how I start these drawings. Till next time, cheers.